Dog sleeps in the rain every day but never enters its house when they discover the reason. Jennifer Miller could no longer ignore the scene that repeated itself every day. From her kitchen window, she watched the old golden dog lying in the rain, shivering from the cold, yet stubbornly refusing to enter the wooden doghouse that had been there for years. Right beside him, "Mom, that dog is out in the rain again," said Tyler, her 15-year-old son, pointing to the neighbor's backyard. "Why won't he go inside his doghouse?" Jennifer shook her head, concerned. The Johnson family had moved into the house next door 3 weeks ago, and ever since, that golden-haired dog with a graying muzzle had remained lying on the wet ground, despite having a perfectly good doghouse available. The animal seemed healthy, didn't appear injured, but something in his eyes carried a deep sadness that tugged at Jennifer's heart. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe he's sick or confused. Older dogs sometimes get disoriented." Tyler looked closer through the window, noticing how the dog maintained a specific position, always lying on his side, his muzzle pointed toward the main house's door, as if waiting for something or someone. The rain fell gently on his fur, which must have once been a bright gold, but now looked faded by time and the elements. "I'll talk to Mr. Johnson when he gets home from work," Jennifer decided, drying her hands on the dish towel. That dog needs help. Richard Johnson arrived home around 6 in the evening, as he always did after a full day's work as an electrician. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tired expression, having moved into the modest house in the Oakwood neighborhood with his wife Martha after selling the larger home they'd lived in for 20 years. The move had become necessary after Martha lost her job at the textile factory, and now they were getting by on just Richard's salary. Jennifer waited a few minutes before walking over to the low wooden fence separating their yards. Richard stood on the porch, staring at the wet dog with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good evening, Mr. Johnson," Jennifer greeted, leaning on the fence. "Good evening, Mrs. Miller," Richard replied, his eyes still fixed on the dog. "Sorry to bother you, but I'm worried about your dog. He stays out in the rain every Saturday and won't go into his doghouse. Is he sick?" Richard was silent for a long moment, running a hand through his rain-dampened hair. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "That dog isn't mine, Mrs. Miller. Jennifer was." Confused. "What do you mean he isn't yours? He's been in your yard for weeks. When we bought the house, he was already here. The previous owners, the Wilson family, moved to Chicago and, well, left him behind." The revelation hit Jennifer like a punch to the gut. She looked back at the dog, who remained in the same position, indifferent to the conversation happening about him. Suddenly, the sadness in his eyes made so much more sense. "They abandoned him?" Jennifer asked, a mix of anger and sorrow rising in her chest. "They said they couldn't take him to their new apartment, that he was too old and would be too much trouble," Richard explained, disapproval in his tone. "They left the doghouse, a good amount of food, and asked us to take care of him until we found him a new home." Jennifer studied the dog again. Now she understood why he refused to enter the doghouse. He was likely waiting for his old family to return, keeping watch from the spot where he could best see the property's entrance. "And do you plan on keeping him?" Richard let out a deep sigh. "Mrs. Miller, Martha and I have always loved dogs, but our financial situation is tight. We can barely support ourselves, let alone feed an animal that size. Besides, my wife is allergic to pet hair. She has trouble breathing when she's near them for too long." Just then, Martha appeared at the door of the house. She was a frail-looking woman in her 50s with a worried expression. She wore a scarf over her head to protect her hair from the dampness and held a cloth in her hands. "Richard, are you talking about Duke?" Martha asked, referring to the dog by the name she'd found on the tags still hanging from his worn-out collar. "Mrs. Miller is worried about him being out in the rain," Richard explained. Martha stepped closer to the fence, keeping a respectful distance from the animal because of her allergy. "I'm worried too. We've tried so many times to get him to go into the doghouse, but he just refuses. Just yesterday, Richard picked him up and put him inside, but 5 minutes later, he was back out again." Mrs. Miller observed the dog's behavior more carefully. Duke, as she now knew he was called, held himself in a way that suggested alertness, even if he seemed resigned. His ears twitched slightly at every sound, as if he were always waiting to hear something specific. "Do you know how long the Wilson family lived here?" Mrs. Miller asked. "From what the neighbor on the corner told us, they lived here for over 15 years, Martha replied. "Duke came here as a puppy. He practically grew up in this house." The information made Mrs. Miller understand the depth of the trauma the dog was going through. 15 years was practically a dog's entire life, and suddenly he had lost not only his family but the whole world he knew. Did they leave any contact information? Maybe if we called them... Richard shook his head. They only left a phone, a number that doesn't work anymore. They said they'd get a new chip when they arrived in Chicago, but we never heard from them again. The rain began to fall harder, and Duke remained motionless in his spot. Mrs. Miller's heart ached seeing the animal so consumed by his sorrow. "Mr. Johnson, may I try something?" Mrs. Miller asked. "I'll get a towel and maybe some food, maybe if I can earn his trust." "Of course, Mrs. Miller. Any help is welcome," Richard agreed. Mrs. Miller went back home and explained the situation to Tyler, who was outraged by the animal's abandonment. Together they grabbed an old towel, some leftover shredded chicken from lunch, and a bowl of water. When they returned to the neighbor's backyard, Duke lifted his head for the first time since Mrs. Miller had started observing him. His brown eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Hi, Duke," Mrs. Miller said softly, crouching at a safe distance from the dog. "I brought something tasty for you." Duke sniffed the air, clearly interested in the smell of the food, but didn't move from his spot. Mrs. Miller placed the bowl of chicken a few feet away and stepped back. "I won't force you," she continued, keeping her tone gentle. "But if you want to eat, it's right here." For nearly 10 minutes, Duke just watched the food. Tyler grew impatient, but Mrs. Miller motioned for him to stay quiet. Finally, the dog slowly stood up, clearly hungry, and approached the bowl. He ate ravenously, but kept his eyes alert, as if afraid the food might be taken away at any moment. "Good boy," Mrs. Miller murmured, feeling a small victory. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. After finishing the food, Duke returned to his original spot, on the wet ground, completely ignoring the dry doghouse just a few feet away. Jennifer tried to approach him with a towel, but the dog backed away, making it clear he still didn't trust her enough to allow physical contact. "I'll try again tomorrow," Jennifer said to Richard and Martha, who had watched the whole scene from the porch. That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep well. The image of Duke lying in the rain, waiting for a family that would never return, haunted her. She had formed an emotional connection with the dog that she couldn't explain, and she felt compelled to help him somehow. The next morning, even before making breakfast, Jennifer was back in the Johnsons' yard with more food for Duke. The dog recognized her immediately, and this time he hesitated less before approaching the bowl. "You're making progress," Martha remarked, stepping outside to hang some laundry on the clothesline. "He's starting to trust me," Jennifer replied, watching Duke eat. "But I still don't understand why he won't go into the doghouse." "Maybe he thinks that if he goes in there, he'll have to accept that his family isn't coming back," Martha suggested, showing a sensitivity that surprised Jennifer. The observation made perfect sense. Duke was in denial, refusing to accept his new reality. The doghouse represented a final change he wasn't ready to make. Over the next few days, Jennifer established a routine. Every morning and evening, she brought food and water to Duke. Gradually, the dog began approaching her more quickly and even allowed her to lightly touch his head during one of the meals. "He's growing fond of you," Richard observed, having started to watch Jennifer's visits with increasing interest. "And I of him," Jennifer admitted. "This dog has a story, a personality. It's not fair for him to be left like this, abandoned." Tyler had also gotten involved in the situation. After school, he always stopped by the Johnsons' yard to see Duke and talk to him. The dog had started showing some excitement when he saw the teenager, even wagging his tail timidly. "Mom, can't we adopt Duke?" Tyler asked one afternoon after spending nearly an hour sitting beside the dog in the rain. Jennifer had thought about it many times, but there were practical obstacles. Their house was small, she worked all day as a freelance seamstress, and their finances were tight. Besides, she didn't know how Duke would react to another change in environment. It's not that simple, Tyler. Duke is traumatized. Taking him away from here might make things worse for him. But he can't stay out in the rain forever, Mom. Winter's coming, it'll get colder. Tyler's observation made Jennifer realize she needed to make a more definitive decision about Duke's situation. She couldn't just keep feeding him indefinitely without solving the bigger problem. That night, Jennifer talked to her husband, Michael, about the possibility of adopting Duke. Michael was a practical man who worked as a mechanic and had always been resistant to the idea of pets because of the costs and responsibilities involved. Jennifer, you know our situation isn't easy either, Michael argued, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. And that dog is big, he must eat a lot. Not to mention vet bills, vaccines. I know, Michael, but I can't just ignore his suffering. And Tyler is really attached to him too. Michael sighed, running a hand over his tired face. What if we tried to find him a better family, someone who's more prepared? I've thought about that, but Duke is too traumatized. He barely trusts me after weeks of trying. Imagine putting him with complete strangers again. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Richard, with a worried expression on his face. Mrs. Jennifer, sorry to bother you at this hour, but Duke is acting strange today. He hasn't eaten the food you left and he's been whimpering softly since this afternoon. Jennifer and Michael followed Richard to the Johnsons' backyard. Duke was lying in his usual spot, but it was clear something was wrong. The dog was trembling more than usual and making small sounds of discomfort. It seems like he's in pain, observed Michael, who had crouched down at a safe distance. We need to take him to the vet, Jennifer said, but immediately realized she didn't know how. Duke still wouldn't let anyone pick him up, and forcing him could traumatize him further. How are we going to do it? Asked Richard. He won't let us touch him properly. Jennifer slowly approached Duke, speaking to him in the gentle tone she always used. The dog recognized her and tried to lift his head, but he was clearly weak. Duke, what's wrong, boy? She murmured, carefully reaching out. To her surprise, Duke didn't pull away when she touched his head. He was so weak his resistance had faded. Jennifer could feel he had a fever. He's burning up, she told the others. He definitely needs medical attention. Michael, who despite his financial struggles had a good heart, made a decision. I'll grab a blanket from the car. Let's take him to the vet now. With great care, the three managed to wrap Duke in the blanket and carry him to Michael's car. The dog was so weak he barely reacted. Jennifer cradled his head in her lap the whole way to the emergency vet clinic. The on-call vet, Dr. Bennett, was a young man who examined Duke with care and professionalism. After some basic tests, he gave his diagnosis. Duke has a respiratory infection, likely from prolonged exposure to damp and cold. It's not serious, but he needs antibiotics and rest in a warm, dry place. Will he be okay? Jennifer asked, visibly concerned. Yes, but it's crucial he stays sheltered for the next few days. Sleeping in the rain could make it much worse, Dr. Bennett explained. Jennifer looked at Michael, who sighed deeply before speaking. Doc, the problem is, this dog refuses to go into his doghouse. He was abandoned by his previous family and has trauma. Dr. Bennett nodded understandingly. Sadly, that's more common than it should be. Abandoned dogs often develop waiting behaviors and resistance. You'll need patience and maybe some specific strategies. What kind of strategies? Richard asked. First, forcing him won't work. You need to make him associate the shelter with something positive. Start by placing food and water inside. Leave items with your scent in there. And most importantly, spend time near the doghouse so he learns it's a safe space. Duke's treatment cost more than Jennifer expected, but Michael paid without complaint. On the way back, they discussed how to follow the vet's advice. I'll spend more time in the yard with him, Jennifer decided. If needed, I'll bring my sewing outside so he gets used to me being around. When they got home, Duke was a bit more alert thanks to the fluids he'd received. They placed him in a spot sheltered from the rain, but not in the doghouse yet to avoid pushing him too soon. In the days that followed, Jennifer devoted herself even more to Duke. She carried her portable sewing machine and worked in the Johnsons' backyard, always talking to the dog and staying close to him. Richard and Martha were impressed by her dedication. "Mrs. Miller, you don't have to do this," said Martha. "We can help more too." "I want to help," Jennifer replied. "Duke and I have formed a bond. I think he trusts me more than anyone else." Indeed, Duke had begun showing signs of improvement, not just physically but emotionally. He started following Jennifer with his eyes wherever she moved in the yard, and when she sat down to sew, he would lie beside her. Tyler also became more involved. After school, he did his homework sitting on the ground next to Duke, telling him about his day and reading books aloud. The dog seemed to enjoy the company and the teenager's calm voice. "I think he's starting to form a new family," Michael observed one afternoon when he saw Duke lying between Jennifer and Tyler as they sewed and studied in the yard. Michael's observation was correct, but Duke still stubbornly refused to go inside the doghouse. Every attempt to place food inside ended with the dog going hungry until someone put the bowl back outside. Dr. Bennett had recommended weekly checkups to monitor Duke's recovery. During the second visit, he noted the dog's significant physical improvement, but remained concerned about the emotional issue. "Duke is physically healed, but you still need to resolve the housing situation. Fall is coming, and even if he doesn't get sick again, it's not healthy for a dog his age to be exposed to the elements." "We're trying, doctor, but he just won't go inside the doghouse," Jennifer explained. "Have you tried other approaches? Maybe moving the doghouse or changing something about it?" The suggestion made Jennifer think. Maybe Duke refused the doghouse not just because it symbolized abandonment, but because it was specifically tied to the Wilson family. If they modified or rearranged the space, he might accept it better. "I'll try making some changes," Jennifer decided. The following weekend, Jennifer, Michael, Tyler, Richard, and Martha gathered to make adjustments to Duke's usual spot. First, they moved the doghouse a few feet to a more sheltered position, where Duke could still see the property's entrance, but was better protected from wind and rain. Then Jennifer had an idea. She brought some of the clothes she had recently sewn and hung them near the doghouse so her scent would linger there. She also placed one of Tyler's old t-shirts inside. "Duke, look here," Jennifer called, sitting at the entrance of the doghouse. "Come here, boy." Duke approached, but stopped a few feet away when he realized she was inside the doghouse. He stood there wagging his tail, clearly torn between wanting to get closer to Jennifer and resisting going into the shelter. "It's just a doghouse. Duke, there's nothing scary in here," Jennifer continued, lightly tapping the floor inside. To everyone's surprise, Duke took a few hesitant steps toward the entrance. He stopped again, sniffed intensely, and backed away. But for the first time since they'd started trying, he had seriously considered going in. "Progress," Tyler cheered, trying to contain his excitement so as not to startle Duke. Jennifer repeated the exercise several times throughout the afternoon. With each attempt, Duke got a little closer to the entrance, but he still couldn't take the final step. Inside. "It's like there's an invisible barrier for him," Martha observed. "Deep trauma can create exactly that kind of block," Michael explained, having researched canine behavior online. "It's as if his brain associates the doghouse with something bad." As the days passed, Jennifer continued with the strategy of spending time inside the doghouse to show Duke it was a safe place. Little by little, the dog started putting his front paws at the entrance, but never his whole body. One afternoon, Richard had a different idea. "What if we brought something that belonged to the previous family? Maybe if Duke smells their scent, he'll understand he can still wait for them, but from inside the doghouse." The idea made sense, but there was a practical problem. How are we going to get something from the Wilson family? They moved to Chicago, and we don't have any contact, Jennifer reminded him. "Let me think," said Richard, scratching his chin. "They left some things in the garage when they moved, old stuff they didn't want to take. Maybe there's something that still has their scent." Richard went to the garage and came back with a dusty cardboard box. Inside were some household items, an old blanket, a few magazines, and a wind-up toy that clearly belonged to Duke. "Duke!" called Tyler, holding the toy. "Look what we found!" Duke's reaction was immediate and intense. His eyes lit up, and he ran toward Tyler, jumping and barking for the first time since Jennifer had started caring for him. The toy clearly brought back happy memories. "This is the first time I've seen him show joy," commented Martha, moved. Duke played with the toy for a few minutes, showing an energy no one knew he still had. It was as if, for a moment, he had gone back to being the dog he was before being abandoned. Jennifer had a hunch. She took the toy from Duke's paws and placed it inside the doghouse. "If you want to play more, you'll have to come get it from in here," she said gently. Duke stood at the entrance of the doghouse, staring intently at the toy. For long minutes he stayed completely still, clearly wrestling with an intense internal conflict. "Let's go," Jennifer whispered to the others. "Let him decide on his own." They stepped away but kept watching from a distance. Duke remained at the doghouse entrance for nearly an hour, just looking at the toy. Several times it seemed like he was about to go in, but he always backed out at the last moment. When it was getting dark and they were about to give up on their vigil for the day, it happened. Duke put his front paws inside the doghouse, then his back paws, and finally went all the way in. He picked up the toy and lay down with it in the corner of the doghouse. "He did it!" whispered Tyler, excited. Jennifer felt her eyes fill with tears. After weeks of dedication and patience, Duke had finally overcome an important part of his trauma. "Now let's stay quiet and let him process this," Jennifer advised. They watched silently as Duke stayed inside the doghouse, occasionally playing with the toy, but mostly just enjoying the dry, warm shelter. When it started raining that night, Duke remained inside the doghouse. It was the first time in over a month that he didn't sleep wet. The next morning, Jennifer arrived eager to see how Duke had spent the night. To her delight, he was inside the doghouse, sleeping peacefully with the toy between his paws. "Good morning, Duke," Jennifer said softly. Duke woke up, looked at her, and wagged his tail. For the first time, he seemed genuinely happy and relaxed. "Now you're really starting to heal," she murmured, offering him breakfast. In the following days, Duke began using the doghouse regularly, especially during rain and at night. During the day, he still spent time in the yard, but now he sought shelter when needed. Dr. Bennett was impressed with the progress during the next checkup. "You've achieved exceptional results." Duke not only recovered physically, but is clearly starting to overcome the emotional trauma. "And now?" asked Jennifer. "What do we do from here?" "Now, you need to decide what his future will be. Duke has formed bonds with you, especially with you, Jennifer. The question is whether you have the means and willingness to officially adopt him." The question Jennifer had avoided facing directly was finally on the table. During all those weeks caring for Duke, she had grown deeply attached to the animal, but always thought it was a temporary situation until they found a permanent solution. "Doctor, I'd really like to keep Duke, but my house is small and I have financial limitations," Jennifer began. "I understand the practical concerns," interrupted Dr. Bennett, "but in my experience, the emotional aspect is more important. Duke has already gone through a traumatic abandonment. Subjecting him to another family change could be very harmful, especially now that he's starting to recover." The vet's words weighed on Jennifer's mind the whole way home. Michael had stayed quiet during the appointment, but she could see he was also reflecting on the situation. "Jennifer," said Michael as they were arriving home, "I think we need to have a serious talk about Duke." They sat in the living room, and Michael got straight to the point. "I see how attached you've become to this dog, and how attached he's become to you, and Tyler is also very involved. I know, Michael, but you said yourself our finances are tight. They are, but we're not struggling either, and a dog his age probably doesn't have much longer to live. Maybe it's worth making this investment to give him a dignified old age." Jennifer was surprised by her husband's change of heart. "Are you serious?" "I am. These past few days, seeing how dedicated you've been to Duke, I realized sometimes we need to make choices that aren't just based on numbers. You saved this dog's life, Jennifer. It wouldn't be fair to abandon him now." Tyler, who had been listening from the kitchen, came into the living room with a big smile. "So we're officially adopting Duke. We'll talk to Richard and Martha first," said Jennifer. "After all, technically Duke is still staying at their house." That afternoon, Jennifer went to talk to the neighbors about the possibility of official adoption. Richard and Martha were visibly relieved by the proposal. "Mrs. Miller, we tried to take care of him as best we could, but it's obvious he's formed a special bond with you," said Richard. "It would be the best solution for everyone." "I feel bad for not being able to take better care of him," confessed Martha. "But with my allergies and our financial situation—" "Don't feel guilty," Jennifer interrupted. "You did what you could in a difficult situation. The important thing is that Duke is okay." They agreed Duke would move to Jennifer's house the following week, but a new complication arose. Duke was so used to that backyard that he might struggle to adapt to a new environment. "What if he doesn't adjust to our house?" asked Tyler. "What if he wants to come back here?" Dr. Bennett, when consulted about the issue, suggested a gradual transition. "Take Duke to spend a few hours at your house, but let him return to sleep in the doghouse he already knows. Gradually increase the time until he feels comfortable staying permanently." The strategy worked better than expected. Duke showed curiosity about Jennifer's house from the very first visit. He explored every room, always staying close to Jennifer, and seemed particularly interested in Tyler's bedroom. "I think he likes the smell of my books," joked Tyler, watching Duke sniff his bookshelf intently. On the third day of visits, Duke lay down on Jennifer's living room rug and slept for several hours. It was a clear sign he was starting to feel safe in this new environment. "He's accepting our home," observed Michael, clearly pleased with the progress. Jennifer set up a special space for Duke in her backyard, with a comfortable bed under a covered area, and bowls always filled with water and food. But what moved her most was noticing Duke had brought his rope toy to the new house. "He's bringing his memories here," Jennifer said to Michael. "This means he's accepting this as his new home." The final transition happened naturally. One afternoon, after spending the entire day at Jennifer's house, Duke simply showed no interest in going back to the Johnsons' yard. When Jennifer suggested taking him back, he firmly lay down on the living room rug and refused to move. "I think he's made his decision," Tyler laughed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the first days at his new home, Duke still showed some behaviors linked to his trauma. He avoided being alone and followed Jennifer to every room. When she left for work, he would position himself by the front window watching the street as if waiting for something. "He's still afraid of being abandoned again," explained Dr. Bennett during a follow-up visit. "It's normal. With time and patience, these behaviors should lessen." Jennifer established consistent routines to help Duke feel secure. Every morning she fed him at the same time and spent a few minutes playing with him before starting work. In the afternoon, Tyler took over, giving the dog affection and attention. Michael, who had initially been reluctant about the adoption, surprised the family by developing a special fondness for Duke. In the evenings after work, he often sat on the porch with the dog, talking about his day. "I never thought I'd enjoy having a dog so much," Michael confessed to Jennifer. "Duke has a very special personality." Indeed, as Duke grew more secure, his true personality began to emerge. He proved to be an intelligent, affectionate, and surprisingly playful dog for his age. He had clear preferences. He loved playing fetch in the late afternoon, adored being brushed by Tyler, and held a special affection for Jennifer, following her around the house like a loyal shadow. 2 weeks after the final move, something happened that deeply touched the whole family. Jennifer was sewing in the living room when Duke, who had been sleeping beside her, began to dream. He whimpered softly and moved his paws as if running. Suddenly he woke with a start, looking around confused and disoriented. "What's wrong, Duke?" Jennifer asked, kneeling beside him. Duke looked at her with sad eyes, then walked to the front window, where he stood staring at the street. It was obvious he had dreamed of his previous family and was once again waiting for them to return. Jennifer's heart ached. Despite all the progress, Duke still carried the pain of abandonment. She sat on the floor beside him and spoke gently. "Duke, I know you miss them. I understand you still hope they'll come back. But you need to know you have a new family now who loves you very much." Duke looked at her intently, as if understanding her words. "We'll never abandon you, Duke. This is your home now forever." That night, for the first time since the move, Duke slept without going to the window to watch the street before lying down. It was a small but meaningful step forward. Dr. Bennett had recommended that Duke undergo more comprehensive tests due to his advanced age. The results brought mixed news. On one hand, Duke was in good physical shape for a dog of about 12 years. On the other hand, there were early signs of arthritis and some heart issues that would require special care. Duke likely has a few more years ahead of him, but you need to be prepared for increasing medical costs, explained Dr. Bennett. Dogs his age require more veterinary attention. Jennifer and Michael talked at length about the financial implications of Duke's medical care. The costs would be significant for their already tight budget, but they both agreed they had taken on a responsibility and wouldn't back down. We'll find a way, Jennifer decided. Duke deserves a dignified old age after everything he's been through. To help with the expenses, Jennifer began taking on more sewing jobs, including some larger projects that required more time but paid better. Tyler got a part-time job at a diner on weekends, contributing a small amount toward Duke's care. "It's a family effort," said Tyler, proud to be able to help. Duke seemed to notice the efforts the family was making for him and responded with even more affection and loyalty. He had become a full-fledged member of the family, joining in all their household activities and bringing a joy none of them had anticipated. One afternoon, Jennifer received an unexpected visit. Richard showed up at her door with a worried expression. "Mrs. Miller, I need to tell you something. I got a call today that left Martha and me very upset." Jennifer invited Richard inside, served coffee, and waited for him to explain. Duke, who was lying in the living room, lifted his head when he recognized Richard, but didn't move from his comfortable spot. "The call was from someone claiming to be from the Wilson family," Richard continued, "a relative of theirs who was trying to find Duke." Jennifer felt her stomach drop. What exactly did they want? The person said the Wilson family regretted leaving Duke behind and wanted to know if he was still available to return to them. The news hit Jennifer like a bolt of lightning. In all those months caring for Duke, she had never seriously considered the possibility that his original family might change their minds. "And what did you say?" Jennifer asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I told them Duke wasn't with us anymore, that he'd been adopted by a family who took very good care of him, but the person insisted on getting the contact information for his new owners." Jennifer looked at Duke, who was watching the conversation with interest, as if sensing they were talking about him. The thought of losing him after all the dedication and love they'd shared was unbearable. "Did you give them our contact information?" Jennifer asked. "No, but I said I'd pass along the message. The person left a phone number and asked for the new owners to get in touch if they were interested in returning Duke to his original family." Jennifer took the paper with the number, but her hands trembled slightly. "Richard, do you think they have any legal claim to Duke?" "I don't know, Mrs. Miller. When they moved, they told me clearly they were leaving Duke behind and that we should find him a new family. They never mentioned wanting him back." That night, Jennifer barely slept. She talked at length with Michael about the situation, weighing the emotional and legal aspects of the dilemma they faced. "Jennifer, you need to understand something," Michael said. "Duke isn't just an object that can be passed from one family to another. He's formed bonds with us, especially with you. Taking him away now would be traumatic for him. But what if they have legal rights over him? What if they sue us? First, we'll find out exactly what they want and why they changed their minds. We won't make decisions based on assumptions." The next morning, Jennifer decided to call the number Richard had given her. A woman's voice answered, identifying herself as Patricia Wilson, sister of Robert Wilson, Duke's former owner. "I heard you've been taking care of Duke," said Patricia. "My brother deeply regrets leaving him behind during the move." "And why did he change his mind now?" asked Jennifer, trying to keep her tone neutral. "The apartment in Chicago didn't work out. They had to leave and are now living in a house with a yard again. Robert feels terribly guilty for abandoning Duke." Jennifer felt a mix of anger and sadness. "Patricia, do you realize Duke went through serious trauma because of this abandonment? He got sick, was traumatized, refused to eat properly. I understand it must have been hard, but Duke has always been part of our family. We raised him since he was a puppy." "And yet you abandoned him when it was convenient," Jennifer replied. unable to hide her irritation. Now that it's convenient again, you want him back? The conversation grew tense, but Jennifer managed to gather some important details. The Wilson family had tried adjusting to apartment life in Chicago, but faced financial struggles and had to return to a smaller town. Now they were in a house with a yard, and Robert was insisting on getting Duke back. "Look, Patricia, I need to be honest with you," Jennifer said. "Duke spent months recovering from the trauma of abandonment. He's now settled with our family and is happy. Taking him away would harm him." "But you can't keep a dog that isn't yours," Patricia argued. "Duke was abandoned by your family. We saved him, nursed him when he was sick, helped him overcome the trauma. He is our family now." The call ended without resolution. Patricia said she'd talk to Robert and get back in touch. Jennifer hung up feeling emotionally drained. Tyler was devastated when he heard about the call. "Mom, they can't take Duke away, can they? He's ours now." "I don't know. Son, we'll have to figure out our legal rights in this situation." Michael suggested seeking legal advice, but lawyer fees were beyond their means. Jennifer decided to research abandoned pet ownership laws herself. What she found was both encouraging and concerning. On one hand, legal precedents showed pets abandoned beyond a certain period could be considered under new ownership. On the other, without formal documentation of abandonment, the legal situation was unclear. 3 days later, Robert Wilson called Jennifer personally. He was a middle-aged man with a weary voice who started the conversation more apologetically than his sister. "Mrs. Miller, I want you to know I didn't abandon Duke lightly. The situation in Chicago became financially impossible, and the apartment we rented didn't allow pets. I understand the practical difficulties, Robert, but you need to recognize the impact this had on Duke," Jennifer replied. "He nearly died from grief and illness." "I know, and I carry that guilt every day. That's why I want to make it right, by bringing Duke home." "Robert, with all due respect, Duke is home, our home. He's recovered, adjusted, and is happy. Why traumatize him again with another move?" The conversation lasted over an hour. Robert grew visibly emotional talking about Duke, reminiscing about the 15 years they'd spent together. He genuinely loved the dog and was suffering from the separation. "Mrs. Jennifer, Duke was my children's companion as they grew up. He's part of our family history. Now that we're in a position to care for him again, we want him back." Jennifer felt torn between compassion for Robert and her determination to protect Duke. "Robert, have you considered what's best for Duke, not just what you want?" "What do you mean?" "Duke is 12 years old. He went through severe abandonment trauma. He's finally emotionally stable. Putting him through another drastic change could be very harmful to him." Robert fell silent for a long moment. I hadn't thought of it that way. Besides, Robert, he has health issues that require specific care. Are you able to handle the veterinary costs?" "What health issues?" Jennifer explained Duke's early arthritis and heart problems, as well as the regular costs for medication and vet visits. Robert visibly worried upon learning the dog had developed health issues. "I didn't know he was sick," Robert said. His voice choked. "They're not serious yet, but they need constant monitoring. We took on this responsibility because we love Duke and want him to have a dignified old age." The conversation ended with Robert promising to think more about the situation before making any decision. Jennifer hoped she had planted seeds of reflection about what was truly best for Duke. In the following days, the family lived in constant anxiety. Duke seemed to sense the tension and became more affectionate than usual, as if trying to comfort them. Jennifer wondered if dogs had some intuition about what was happening. A week later, Robert called again. This time, his voice sounded different, heavier, more thoughtful. "Mrs. Jennifer, I talked a lot with my family about Duke's situation, and I also spoke with a vet here in town about the care he needs." Jennifer held her breath, preparing for any answer. "I want you to know it was very hard to come to this decision, but I think Duke is better off with you." Jennifer felt such immense relief she could barely speak. "Robert, you were right when you said the abandonment was traumatic for him. And now that I know about his health issues, I realize he needs care I might not be able to provide properly." "That doesn't mean you don't love him," Jennifer said, wanting to comfort him. "I love Duke too much to be selfish with him. If he's happy and well cared for with you, then that's where he should stay." Robert made just one request. He wanted to visit Duke one last time, to say a proper goodbye and make sure he was making the right decision. Jennifer agreed to the visit, but was uneasy about how Duke would react upon seeing Robert again. It would be the ultimate test of where the dog's true loyalties lay. Robert arrived the following Saturday morning. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s, driving an old but well-kept car. Jennifer greeted him at the door and led him to the backyard, where Duke was sleeping under a tree. When Duke saw Robert, his reaction was immediate and intense. He jumped up and ran toward the man, barking and leaping with a joy Jennifer hadn't seen since his first days with the rope toy. "Duke, my boy," Robert said, kneeling and letting the dog lick his face eagerly. Jennifer felt a pang of jealousy and fear. What if Duke wanted to leave with Robert? What if all the connection they'd built wasn't enough? For 15 minutes, Robert and Duke reunited. The dog was visibly happy to see his former owner, but Jennifer noticed something interesting. After the initial excitement, Duke began shifting his attention between Robert and her, as if torn between two loyalties. "He looks handsome and healthy," Robert remarked, observing Duke affectionately. "You've taken such good care of him." "We love him very much," Jennifer replied simply. Robert spent nearly 2 hours at the house, watching how Duke interacted with the entire family. He saw how the dog followed Jennifer around the house, played with Tyler, and lay beside Michael on the porch. "It's obvious he's made a new family," Robert said, his voice tinged with sadness and acceptance. "I was being selfish, wanting to take him away from a place where he's happy. When it was time for Robert to leave, something happened. That confirmed to everyone the decision was right." Robert walked to his car, and Duke accompanied him to the gate, clearly sad about the goodbye. But when Robert got in the car and started the engine, Duke didn't try to follow or show any desperation to go with him. Instead, Duke watched the car drive away for a few moments, then calmly returned to the backyard and lay down beside Jennifer, who was sitting on the porch steps. "He chose to stay," Tyler murmured, moved. Robert had left a letter for Jennifer, which she read that night. In the letter, he thanked her for taking care of Duke and officially formalized the transfer of ownership. He also left emergency phone numbers and asked Jennifer to keep him updated on Duke's health. "I made a terrible mistake abandoning Duke, but you turned my mistake into something good. Duke has a new family who loves him as much as we did. I only ask that you remember he was deeply loved before he knew you, and that you care for him with the love he deserves until his last days." The letter deeply moved Jennifer. She realized Robert wasn't a bad man, just someone who had made a difficult decision under complicated circumstances and was now trying to do the right thing. With the legal matter resolved, the family could finally relax and enjoy life with Duke without the anxiety of a possible separation. Duke also seemed more at ease after Robert's visit, as if the official goodbye had given him a kind of emotional closure. Dr. Bennett was impressed by the emotional maturity Duke showed throughout the process. "It's rare to see a dog process such a complex situation so healthily. He's truly found emotional balance with you." In the following months, Duke continued to integrate further into the family. He developed his own routines. Every morning, he walked Jennifer to the gate when she went to buy bread. In the afternoon, he waited for Tyler to return from school by sitting at the front window. And at night, he lay at Michael's feet while he watched TV. "It's like he knows exactly what his role is in our family," Michael observed. Duke also became something of a neighborhood celebrity. Neighbors who had followed his story from afar stopped on the street to greet him and ask how he was doing. Mrs. Wilson, the elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses down, always saved treats for Duke when he passed by during walks. "This dog has an inspiring story," Mrs. Wilson would say. "It shows it's possible to start over after a great disappointment." Mrs. Wilson's observation made Jennifer reflect on how the experience with Duke had changed not just the dog's life, but the entire family's. Tyler had become more responsible and compassionate. Michael had discovered a more sensitive side of himself, and she had learned about the capacity for unconditional love and the importance of perseverance even when situations seem hopeless. One afternoon, as Jennifer was sewing on the porch with Duke lying beside her, she received an unexpected call. It was a woman named Samantha who had heard Duke's story from Mrs. Wilson. "Mrs. Miller, I have a dog who was abandoned too. He's going through the same thing Duke went through. Mrs. Wilson thought maybe you could give me some advice." Jennifer was immediately intrigued. "What kind of situation?" "He's a mixed breed, about 8 years old. His owners moved away and left him on the street. For 2 weeks now, he's been lying in front of the house where he used to live, waiting for them to come back. He barely eats, he's skinny, and it's already rained several times." The story echoed deeply in Jennifer's memory. "Where do you live, Samantha?" "Right here in the neighborhood, on Palm Street. The house is number 245. Jennifer knew the street and decided she would see the situation for herself. "Samantha, could I stop by tomorrow morning to meet this dog?" "Of course. I'd be so grateful for any help." That evening, Jennifer talked to her family about the possibility of helping another abandoned dog. Everyone was excited by the idea, especially Tyler. "Mom, we could use what we learned with Duke to help other dogs who've been through the same thing," Tyler suggested. Michael also supported the idea, but with a practical note. "Jennifer, helping is one thing, but we can't take in another dog right now." "I know, Michael, but maybe we can guide other people on how to handle abandonment trauma, like we did with Duke." The next morning, Jennifer went to Palm Street with Tyler. They easily found the house Samantha had described. On the sidewalk in front, lying exactly the way Duke used to, was a medium-sized dog with black and brown fur, visibly thin and listless. Samantha lived next door and came out to meet them as soon as she saw them stop. "That's him," Samantha said, pointing to the dog. "His name is Lucky, according to the neighbors. The family lived here for 5 years, and when they moved last month, they just left him behind." Jennifer watched Lucky with a heavy heart. The resemblance to Duke's early situation was striking. The dog had the same desperate waiting posture, the same sad and lost look. "Is anyone feeding him?" Jennifer asked. "Some neighbors and I leave food, but he eats very little. It's like he's not interested in anything." Tyler cautiously approached Lucky and crouched a few feet away. "Hey Lucky, you okay, buddy?" Lucky lifted his head and looked at Tyler, but didn't move. His eyes held the same deep sadness Duke had shown in those first days. "Samantha, would you be interested in adopting Lucky officially?" Jennifer asked. "I'd love to, but I live alone and work all day. It wouldn't be fair to him." Jennifer spent nearly an hour observing Lucky and talking with Samantha about the situation. Gradually, she began forming a plan. "Samantha, what if we try the same strategies with Lucky that worked for Duke? You could be his primary caregiver, but my family and I can guide the process. How would that work? First, we need to build trust. You'll spend more time with him, feed him regularly, talk to him. Then, little by little, we'll introduce the idea that he can have a new home." Samantha was excited by the prospect of helping Lucky in a structured way. "But what if it doesn't work? What if he doesn't adjust?" "It will work," Tyler said confidently. "It worked with Duke, and it'll work with Lucky too." In the following days, Jennifer and Tyler began making regular visits to Lucky, applying the same techniques they'd used with Duke. First, they established a feeding routine. Afterward, they began spending time sitting near him, talking and allowing him to get used to their presence. Samantha followed Jennifer Miller's guidance religiously. She even left work early to spend time with Lucky, and on weekends she dedicated several hours to earning the animal's trust. "It's remarkable how similar the patterns are," Jennifer observed. "Lucky is showing exactly the same behaviors Duke did at first." After 2 weeks of consistent care, Lucky began showing signs of improvement. He started eating with more appetite, showing interest when people approached, and even wagged his tail a few times when he saw Tyler arriving. "He's responding," Samantha celebrated. "It's amazing how a little love and attention can make such a difference." The next step was convincing Lucky to leave the spot where he waited for his previous owners. Here, Jennifer decided to try a slightly different approach than the one she had used with Duke. "Samantha, Do you have a backyard at your house? Jennifer asked. I do, a small one. But yes. What if we bring Lucky over to spend a few hours in your backyard, just so he can get familiar and gradually adjust? The strategy worked better than they expected. Lucky, who had already bonded with Samantha, agreed to follow her to her house. At first he was anxious and wanted to return to the sidewalk where he had waited. But after a few visits, he began relaxing in the new environment. Dr. Bennett, when consulted about Lucky, was impressed with the progress. You're becoming experts at rehabilitating dogs traumatized by abandonment. The vet's observation planted a seed in Jennifer's mind. Doctor, is there a lot of demand for this kind of work? Unfortunately, pet abandonment is more common than it should be, and not everyone knows how to handle the emotional trauma it causes in animals. Jennifer began considering the possibility of turning her experience with Duke and Lucky into something bigger. Maybe she could help other animals and families going through similar situations. After a month of intensive work, Lucky had fully adjusted to Samantha's home. He no longer waited on the sidewalk for his previous owners and now spent his days in Samantha's backyard, playing and showing clear signs of happiness. Samantha, Lucky is unrecognizable, Jennifer remarked during one of her follow-up visits. He seems like a completely different dog. It's true, he's playful, affectionate, eats well. It's like he's come back to life. The success with Lucky gave Jennifer a sense of fulfillment she hadn't expected. She realized she had found something she was naturally good at, something that could make a real difference in the lives of abandoned animals. A few weeks later, Jennifer received another call. It was George, an older man who lived in another neighborhood and had heard about Duke and Lucky through a mutual friend. Miss Jennifer, my sister passed away last month and left behind 2 cats. I brought them to my house, but they're not adjusting. They hide all day, don't eat properly. I think they're depressed. Jennifer had never worked with cats before, but decided it was worth a try. George, can I stop by your house to see the situation? George's cats, named Honey and Sugar, were clearly suffering from the loss of their owner and the change in environment. They hid under furniture, only came out to use the litter box and barely touched their food. They lived with my sister for 15 years, George explained. To them, she was their whole world. Jennifer adapted the techniques she had learned with dogs. She guided George to establish consistent routines, speak gently to the cats even when they were hiding, and be patient with the adjustment process. George, cats process grief differently from dogs, but the basic principles are similar. They need time, consistency, and affection. Working with Honey and Sugar was more challenging than with the dogs, but gradually Jennifer achieved results. After 6 weeks, the cats had adapted to George's home and were showing normal behaviors again. Mrs. Miller, you have a special gift for this, said George. Have you ever thought of making it a profession? George's suggestion echoed something Jennifer had already been considering. She talked to her family about the possibility of formalizing her work with traumatized animals. Mom, you've already helped 3 families and several animals, said Tyler. Maybe it's time to make this official. Michael also supported the idea, but with his usual practical concerns. Jennifer, this would be wonderful, but you need to think about how to structure it financially. You can't work for free forever. Jennifer began researching how to formalize animal-related work. She discovered she could work as an animal behavior consultant, offering guidance to families who had adopted traumatized animals. Dr. Bennett was excited when Jennifer shared her plans. Jennifer, I regularly see cases of animals with behavioral trauma. I could refer clients to you if you're interested in partnerships. The prospect of turning her passion into a profession was thrilling, but Jennifer knew she'd need more theoretical knowledge to complement her practical experience. I'll look for courses on animal behavior, Jennifer decided. I want to do this the right way. She enrolled in an online course on canine and feline psychology offered by a veterinary university. The course was intensive and expensive, but Jennifer and Michael agreed it was worth the investment. While studying, Jennifer continued helping cases that came to her through referrals. Each animal and family presented unique challenges, but she was developing a systematic approach that worked in most situations. Duke, throughout this time, had become not just a beloved family member, but also a sort of ambassador for Jennifer's work. When she met with clients at home for consultations, Duke was always present, demonstrating the possible results of a successful rehabilitation process. "Duke is the best advertisement for your work," Tyler joked. "He shows it's possible to bounce back after trauma." Jennifer's work began gaining recognition in the local community. The area veterinarian started referring clients to her regularly, and some pet stores began promoting her services. "Jennifer, you're becoming known as the city's expert on abandoned animals," Dr. Bennett remarked during one of Duke's routine checkups. Jennifer's professional success brought financial benefits that eased the family's budget pressures. The costs of Duke's medical care, which had once been a constant worry, could now be covered easily. "It's ironic," Michael observed. "Duke didn't just bring joy to our family, but also opened a career path that's improving our financial situation." 6 months after officially starting her work as an animal behavior consultant, Jennifer received an unexpected invitation. The city's veterinary association wanted her to give a talk on rehabilitating animals traumatized by abandonment. "Jennifer, you've developed techniques that are helping many animals in our area," Dr. Bennett explained. "It would be valuable to share this knowledge with other professionals." The idea of giving a talk intimidated Jennifer, but she recognized the importance of sharing her findings. "What if I don't know how to answer the veterinarian's technical questions? You have something many of us don't: extensive hands-on experience with real cases. Your emotional approach complements our technical knowledge." Jennifer accepted the invitation and spent weeks preparing her presentation. She decided to structure the talk around Duke's story, using it as an example of the principles she had developed. On the day of the lecture, Jennifer was nervous, but having Michael and Tyler in the audience put her at ease. She told Duke's story from his abandonment to his full recovery, explaining each step of the process and the techniques she used. "What I've learned working with Duke and other animals is that emotional trauma in animals is real and requires a specific approach," Jennifer told the audience of veterinarians. "It's not enough to care only for their physical health. We need to care for their emotional well-being too." The lecture was very well received. Veterinarians from several nearby cities approached Jennifer after the presentation, interested in partnerships and learning more about her techniques. "Jennifer, you're creating a new specialty within behavioral veterinary medicine," commented one of the attending veterinarians. The success of the lecture opened new professional opportunities for Jennifer. She began receiving invitations to consult on cases in other cities and even to develop a formal treatment protocol for abandoned animals. Throughout this period of Jennifer's professional growth, Duke remained the emotional heart of the Johnson family. At 13, he had developed a wise and affectionate personality, always present during the family's important moments. "Duke isn't just our dog," reflected Tyler, now in his senior year of high school. "He's like the patriarch of the family. He always knows when someone is sad or happy." Indeed, Duke had developed remarkable emotional sensitivity. When Jennifer was stressed with work, he would lie beside her. When Tyler was studying for important exams, Duke stayed quietly in his room. When Michael came home tired from work, Duke greeted him with extra affection. "It's like he knows this family saved him and now he wants to give back by taking care of all of us emotionally," Michael observed. Dr. Bennett, during a routine checkup, remarked on Duke's exceptional adaptation. "In 15 years of practice, I've rarely seen an animal overcome abandonment trauma so completely." Duke didn't just recover, he thrived. Despite his advanced age, Duke's health remained stable thanks to constant care. Jennifer had learned to monitor every sign of changes in his condition and always sought preventive treatment. "Duke is in much better health than many younger dogs I treat," Dr. Bennett said. "Love makes all the difference." One Sunday afternoon, nearly 2 years after Duke's official adoption, Jennifer was in the backyard with him when she received an unexpected call. It was Robert Wilson. "Mrs. Miller, I hope you don't mind my call. I was thinking about Duke and wanted to know how he's doing." Jennifer was surprised but answered kindly. "He's doing very well, Robert. He turned 13 last month and is still healthy and happy." "I'm so glad to hear that. Would you mind if I emailed you some old photos of him? I found several from when he was younger that you might like to have." The offer touched Jennifer deeply. Of course, Robert. It would be wonderful to have those memories of his younger days. Robert sent over 50 photos of Duke over the years. There were pictures of him as a puppy, playing with the Wilson children, at birthday parties, on walks. It was like receiving the complete photographic history of Duke's life. "Look how adorable he was as a puppy," said Tyler, looking at the photos on the computer. "And here he is playing with those kids." Jennifer Miller organized the photos into a physical album, mixing old pictures with recent ones of Duke with his new family. The result was a complete record of Duke's life, showing he had been loved in both phases of his life. "It's beautiful to see Duke had a life full of love both before and after coming here," observed Michael. "Sometimes the bad things that happen lead to even better ones." Duke's photo album became one of the family's most treasured possessions. Jennifer often showed it to clients going through animal rehabilitation processes as proof that it was possible to overcome trauma and find happiness again. "Duke is living proof that second chances really work," Jennifer would tell families who were discouraged about animals they had adopted. Jennifer's work continued to grow. She had become a regional authority in rehabilitating traumatized animals and regularly took on challenging cases from nearby towns. One afternoon, she received a particularly difficult case. A young female dog rescued from abuse, so traumatized she wouldn't let anyone near her. "Jennifer, we've tried everything," said the shelter volunteer who brought her in. "She's been with us for 2 months with no progress. The vets say she's physically fine, but emotionally..." Jennifer watched the dog, named Luna, curled up in the corner of the room, trembling despite the warmth. Her eyes held a deep fear beyond what Jennifer had seen in abandonment cases. "This is different from the cases I usually handle," Jennifer admitted. "Abandonment is traumatic, but abuse creates even deeper scars." Still, she took on the challenge. She adapted her techniques, working with extreme patience and even slower progress than usual. The work with Luna stretched on for months, frustrating and emotionally draining, but Jennifer persisted. During this time, Duke seemed to sense Jennifer was going through a tough professional period and became even more affectionate and supportive. "Even Duke is worried about you," Michael noted, watching how the dog stayed even closer to Jennifer on days she came home, especially tired from working with Luna. Gradually, Luna began showing small signs of progress. First, she stopped trembling when Jennifer approached. Then she started taking food from her hand. Finally, after 4 months of intensive work, she let Jennifer touch her. "Jennifer, you did the impossible," the shelter volunteer said when Luna was finally adopted by a family prepared to continue her recovery. Luna was considered unadoptable. The success with Luna further raised Jennifer's professional reputation. She began receiving cases from other regions and even inquiries about developing a training program for others interested in working with traumatized animals. "Mom, you're becoming famous," joked Tyler, now studying veterinary medicine in college, inspired by his mother's work. Jennifer had found not just a profession, but a calling. Every animal she helped brought a deep satisfaction she'd never experienced in other jobs. Throughout Jennifer's growth and success, Duke remained the emotional heart of the family, a living symbol that transformation was possible. At 14, he had become a wise and serene dog, seeming to understand his special role in the family. And Jennifer's work. One morning, Jennifer woke up and found Duke lying on the living room rug in a slightly different position than usual. He was alert and responsive, but seemed slower in his movements. "Duke, are you okay, boy?" Jennifer asked, kneeling beside him. Duke wagged his tail and tried to get up, but he was clearly uncomfortable. Jennifer immediately took him to Dr. Bennett for an evaluation. "Jennifer, Duke is 14 years old," Dr. Bennett explained after a thorough exam. "It's natural for him to start showing age-related limitations. His arthritis is more advanced, and there are some signs his heart is working harder." "Is he in pain?" Jennifer asked, worried. "He's not suffering, but we'll need to adjust his care. Pain medication, a special diet, and gentler exercise. With the right care, he can still have a good quality of life for a while." Jennifer stepped up her care for Duke even more. She adapted the house to make it easier for him to move around, prepared a special diet, and established a routine of gentle exercises to help with his arthritis without straining his heart. Duke deserves the best possible golden years, Jennifer told the family. He's saved our family in so many ways. Now it's our turn to take care of him. Duke responded well to the adjusted care. Though physically slower, he kept his loving spirit and emotional wisdom. He still joined Jennifer's work sessions, providing comfort to traumatized animals that came in for treatment. It's amazing how Duke can still help other animals despite his limitations, Dr. Bennett observed. He has a natural healing energy. 6 months after the diagnosis of age-related limitations, Duke had a particularly rough day. Jennifer noticed he was breathing harder and seemed uncomfortable. An emergency visit with Dr. Bennett revealed Duke's heart was struggling much more. It was time to make decisions about more intensive treatments. Jennifer, we can try stronger medications, but I need to be honest. Duke is nearing the natural end of his life. The focus now is ensuring his comfort and dignity. The news was devastating for the family, though not unexpected. Jennifer had mentally prepared for this moment since they adopted Duke, knowing he was already a senior when he came to them. "How long?" Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. "It's hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months. It depends on how he responds." To palliative care. Jennifer talked at length with Michael and Tyler about what to do. They decided they wanted Duke to spend his final days at home, surrounded by family, with all the comfort possible. "Duke taught us about unconditional love," Michael said. "We'll repay him by giving him a farewell full of love." In the following weeks, Duke became the absolute center of the family's attention. Jennifer canceled work commitments to spend more time with him. Tyler came home from university every day to be there. Michael spent afternoons sitting with Duke on the porch. "I'm grateful for every extra day we have with him," Michael said, stroking Duke as he rested in the afternoon sun. Duke seemed to sense he was getting special attention and responded with even more affection than usual. On days he felt better, he still showed interest in greeting the other animals Jennifer treated, as if he wanted to keep helping until the very end. "Even sick, Duke still wants to help," Jennifer remarked, watching him gently interact with a traumatized puppy she was rehabilitating. Dr. Bennett made regular home visits to monitor Duke's comfort and adjust medications as needed. He was impressed by the quality of life the Johnson family was able to provide for Duke, even in his delicate condition. "You're setting an example of how to care for an elderly animal with dignity," said Dr. Bennett. "Duke is lucky to have found a family like you." One morning, Jennifer woke up and found Duke lying on his favorite bed in the living room, breathing calmly but visibly weaker than the day before. She sat beside him and began speaking tenderly. "Duke, you know we love you so much, right? You've transformed our family and the lives of so many other animals. You've fulfilled your mission here." Duke looked at Jennifer with eyes still bright with intelligence and love, wagging his tail weakly. Michael and Tyler joined Jennifer in the living room, and the three spent the morning talking to Duke and reminiscing about special moments they had shared. "Remember when you finally went into your doghouse for the first time," said Tyler. "Or when you helped me study for my college entrance exams, always staying by my side?" Duke seemed to be listening attentively, responding with small gestures. That showed he recognized the stories they were telling. In the afternoon, Dr. Bennett made a final house call. After carefully examining Duke, he spoke with the family about what to expect. "Duke is very weak, but he's not suffering. He's naturally preparing to pass. Keep doing exactly what you're doing, offering love, comfort, and presence." That night, the family decided someone would always stay by Duke's side. They took turns throughout the night, talking to him, petting him, and simply being there. In the early hours, Duke's breathing became more irregular. Jennifer, who was with him at that moment, called Michael and Tyler. The three gathered around Duke's bed, gently touching him and whispering words of love. "Thank you for everything you gave us, Duke," Jennifer whispered. "You can rest now. We'll always love you." Duke looked at each family member one last time, then closed his eyes peacefully. His breathing gradually softened until it stopped completely, as if he had simply drifted into a deep and peaceful sleep. The family stayed by Duke's side for a long time, processing the goodbye and feeling deep gratitude for the years they had shared with him. "He left just as he lived with us," Michael said, tears in his eyes, "with dignity, peace, and surrounded by love." Duke's funeral was simple but moving. The family buried him in the backyard, under the tree where he loved to rest. Dr. Bennett, Samantha with Lucky, and several families Jennifer had helped attended to pay their respects. "Duke wasn't just a dog," Dr. Bennett said during the small ceremony. "He was a teacher who showed us all about resilience, forgiveness, and the ability to love again after deep trauma." In the days following Duke's passing, the house felt strangely quiet. The family grieved, but was also filled with precious memories and gratitude for the years they had shared. "It's strange how someone can feel so much longing and so much gratitude at the same time," Tyler remarked. Jennifer needed a few weeks before she felt ready to return to work with other animals. When she finally resumed her activities, she found that the experience of caring for Duke until the end had added a new dimension to her work. "Jennifer, you've become even more sensitive and effective with the animals," Dr. Bennett commented. "Your experience with Duke deepened your understanding of the bond between humans and animals." 6 months after Duke's passing, Jennifer received a call that would once again change the course of her life. It was a veterinary university offering her a position as an instructor in a pioneering behavioral therapy program for traumatized animals. "Professor Jennifer, your practical work and innovative approach are exactly what we need for this program," explained the coordinator. "Would you be interested in training the next generation of specialists in this field?" The offer was tempting, but Jennifer needed to consider it carefully. Accepting would mean significant changes in her life, including possibly moving to the city where the university was located. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Jennifer asked. "Of course, it's an important decision, but I want you to know that your work with Duke and other animals has created a methodology that could help thousands of animals if taught properly." Jennifer talked at length with Michael and Tyler about the opportunity. Both encouraged her to accept, recognizing the importance of expanding the impact of her work. "Mom, you can honor Duke's memory by teaching others to do what you did together," said Tyler. "Duke started this journey with you," added Michael. "Maybe it's time to take it to the next level." After much reflection, Jennifer decided to accept the position at the university. It would be a way to carry on Duke's legacy and maximize the impact of everything she had learned through her experience with him. "Duke taught me that second chances are possible," Jennifer told Dr. Bennett when announcing her decision. "Now I'll teach others to give second chances too." On her last day before moving to begin her new position at the university, Jennifer visited Duke's grave in the backyard. She sat under the tree and talked to him, just as she used to when he was alive. "Duke, you'd never believe where your story has taken us. I'll teach veterinarians and students everything I learned from you. Your life wasn't just transformed. Now it'll transform the lives of so many other animals through the people I train." The wind gently rustled the leaves of the tree, as if Duke were responding to her words. Jennifer began her new career at the university full of enthusiasm and determination. Her first lecture was on abandonment trauma in animals, a love and patience-based approach. As always, she started by telling Duke's story. "Duke taught me that emotional healing is possible when we offer consistent love, endless patience, and a willingness to see the world through the eyes of a traumatized animal," Jennifer told her first class of students. The students were deeply moved by Duke's story and eager to learn the techniques Jennifer had developed. Over the following semesters, she trained dozens of future veterinarians specializing in animal trauma. "Professor Jennifer, your approach is revolutionizing how we think about animal behavior," remarked one of her most dedicated students. The program Jennifer helped create at the university became a national benchmark for behavioral therapy in animals. Students came from all over the country to learn her techniques, and gradually more traumatized animals began receiving proper care nationwide. 2 years after starting at the university, Jennifer received an unexpected letter. It was from Robert Wilson, who had learned about her new career through an article in a veterinary magazine. "Mrs. Miller, I'm moved to hear that Duke not only found a loving family, but also inspired a career that's helping so many other animals. I always knew Duke was special, but I never imagined his story would have such a big impact. Thank you for turning my mistake into something beautiful. Robert's letter touched Jennifer deeply. She realized that even the most painful aspects of Duke's story, his initial abandonment, had become part of something bigger and more meaningful. Duke didn't just transform our family, now he's transforming an entire profession, reflected Jennifer. At the university, Jennifer established an internship program where students worked directly with real cases of traumatized animals. Samantha, who had become an expert in caring for Lucky, often volunteered, sharing her hands-on experience. It's amazing to see how Duke's story multiplies through every animal we help, Samantha said during one of the internship sessions. Tyler, now in his final year of veterinary school, often attended his mother's classes as a special student. Inspired by the transformation he'd witnessed in Duke, he had decided to specialize in animal behavior. "Mom, I want to carry on Duke's legacy too," Tyler said. "I want my career to be dedicated to helping animals like him." Tyler's words filled Jennifer with pride and emotion. She realized Duke's impact had surpassed even her most optimistic expectations, influencing the next generation of veterinary professionals. 5 years after Duke's passing, Jennifer had become one of the country's most respected authorities on animal trauma. Her methodology, officially named the Duke Protocol in honor of the dog who inspired it, was being used by hundreds of veterinarians, and thousands of animals had benefited. "The Duke Protocol saved my clinic," said a veterinarian from another city during a conference. "I was losing so many cases of traumatized animals because I didn't know how to help them properly." Jennifer also wrote a book telling Duke's full story and detailing her rehabilitation techniques. The book became required reading in many veterinary programs and was translated into other languages. "Duke is helping animals in other countries now too," Michael joked during one of his visits to Jennifer at the university. Every day, Jennifer received success stories from veterinarians applying the Duke Protocol. There were accounts of dogs, cats, and other animals who had overcome traumas of abandonment, abuse, and other distressing situations. "Professor Jennifer, I used your techniques on a cat who had been abandoned 6 months ago and wouldn't let anyone near him. After 3 months of the Duke Protocol, he was adopted by a loving family," wrote a veterinarian from Chicago. Each success story reaffirmed for Jennifer that she had made the right decision accepting the university position. The impact of her work had multiplied exponentially through her students and the protocol she had developed. One autumn afternoon, exactly 7 years after she had first found Duke sleeping in the rain, Jennifer was in her university office when she received a special visit. It was Tyler, now a graduate working as a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior. "Mom, I have some news to share," Tyler said with a smile. "What is it, son?" "There's an opening for an assistant professor here at the university in animal behavior. I'd like to apply. I want to work alongside you." Continuing. Duke's legacy. Jennifer felt her eyes well up with happy tears. The prospect of working with Tyler, perpetuating Duke's impact through generations, was more than she could have dreamed. "Tyler, it would be wonderful to have you here. Duke would be so proud to know he inspired an entire dynasty of advocates for traumatized animals." That night, Jennifer called Michael to share the news about Tyler. They talked at length about how their lives had been transformed by that golden dog who refused to go into his doghouse on rainy days. "Jennifer, sometimes I think Duke knew exactly what he was doing when he chose our family," said Michael. "As if he knew that through us he could help so many other animals." "Maybe that's true," Jennifer replied. "Duke was always wiser than any of us imagined." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. At the end of that semester, Jennifer organized a special ceremony at the university to mark the 7th anniversary of the Duke Protocol. She invited all the veterinarians in the area who had applied its techniques, students who had graduated from her program, and families who had benefited from it. During the ceremony, a video was shown featuring testimonials from dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the work inspired by Duke. There were veterinarians sharing success stories, families expressing gratitude for helping their traumatized pets, and even other rescued animals appearing in the footage. Duke saved far more lives than just his own, said Dr. Bennett in his video testimonial. He started a revolution in how we care for traumatized animals. The most emotional moment of the ceremony came when Samantha appeared with Lucky, now an elderly but still lively and happy dog. Lucky had become something of an ambassador for Jennifer's work, showcasing the possible results of the Duke protocol. Lucky was the second animal saved by the techniques we learned from Duke, Samantha explained to the audience. Today he's 9 years old, fully adjusted, and even helps other traumatized dogs that come to our neighborhood. During the ceremony, Jennifer announced that the university was establishing a permanent fund for animal trauma research to be called the Duke Foundation, in honor of the dog who had inspired it all. This fund will ensure that research into animal trauma continues to advance and that more animals like Duke can get the help they deserve, Jennifer declared. The ceremony ended with Jennifer visiting the memorial garden the university had created in Duke's honor. It was a peaceful space with plants and a plaque briefly telling his story and the impact he had made. "Duke, you'd never believe everything that happened because of your story," Jennifer said, gently touching the memorial plaque. "You didn't just change our family, you transformed an entire field of veterinary medicine." In the years that followed, Jennifer's work continued to grow. The Duke Protocol was officially recognized by the National Veterinary Board as the standard technique for treating traumatized animals. Universities across the country began incorporating her methods into their curricula. Tyler had become an assistant professor and was conducting advanced research on animal trauma, expanding his mother's pioneering work even further. He often told Duke's story to his own students, keeping alive the memory of the dog who had inspired it all. "Duke wasn't just a pet we had," Tyler explained in his lectures. "He was a teacher who showed us about resilience, unconditional love, and the importance of second chances." A decade after Duke's passing, Jennifer received a special honor from the National Veterinarians Association. She was named Innovator of the Year for her groundbreaking work in animal trauma and for revolutionizing the care of abandoned animals. During her acceptance speech for the honor, Jennifer dedicated all the recognition to Duke and all the animals that had inspired her work. "This honor isn't mine," Jennifer told the audience, of hundreds of veterinarians. "It belongs to Duke, the dog who refused to go into his doghouse on rainy days, but through his story taught us all about the importance of patience, love, and hope in healing emotional trauma." The crowd rose in a prolonged standing ovation, acknowledging not only Jennifer's work, but also Duke's lasting legacy. After the ceremony, Jennifer was approached by a young veterinarian who had just graduated. "Professor Jennifer, I studied Duke's case throughout my entire degree. His story inspired me to specialize in animal behavior. I want to dedicate my career to helping traumatized animals, just like you did with Duke." "Duke would be so proud to know he's still inspiring new generations of professionals," Jennifer replied, moved. 15 years after finding Duke sleeping in the rain, Jennifer looked around her university lab, where dozens of students studied cases of animal trauma and developed new rehabilitation techniques. The walls were covered with photos of hundreds of animals saved using the Duke protocol. "Duke, you did it," Jennifer murmured, gazing at a framed photo of Duke on her desk. "You turned your own suffering into hope for thousands of other animals." Just then, Tyler walked into the lab with exciting news. "Mom, I just got confirmation. Our research on trauma in senior animals was accepted for publication in the most important international journal in the field. The Duke Protocol is gaining worldwide recognition. Duke is now helping animals all over the world," Jennifer said, feeling deep satisfaction. "And the best part is, this is just the beginning," Tyler replied. "We have at least 5 new research projects approved, all based on the principles Duke taught us." Jennifer smiled, remembering the golden dog who had refused to enter his doghouse for so many days. Who could have imagined that traumatized animal would become the inspiration for a revolution in behavioral veterinary medicine? As the afternoon passed and students gradually left the lab, Jennifer remained at her desk, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a rain-soaked dog. "Thank you, Duke," she said softly, "for trusting us, for teaching us about unconditional love and for turning your own story of abandonment into hope for so many others. Outside the window, a light rain began to fall. Jennifer smiled, remembering how Duke used to watch the rain in his early days with the Johnson family, and how he had gradually learned that not all rain meant suffering. Sometimes it could mean renewal and new beginnings. Now, 20 years. After that first day when Jennifer saw Duke sleeping in the rain, she was preparing to retire from the university. She had trained hundreds of veterinarians, saved thousands of animals through her protocol, and established a lasting legacy in veterinary medicine. In her final lecture as a professor, Jennifer once again told Duke's full story, from his abandonment to his peaceful death surrounded by love, and how his life had inspired decades of advances in the care of traumatized animals. Duke taught us that every animal deserves a second chance, that love and patience can heal even the deepest traumas, and that one animal can change the world through the people they touch. Jennifer told her last class of students. What will you do with these lessons? How will you carry forward Duke's legacy? One of the students raised their hand. Professor Jennifer, we'll make sure no animal is ever considered beyond help. Duke showed us there's always hope. Exactly, replied Jennifer, tears of pride in her eyes. Duke may have left us long ago, but his spirit of resilience and his capacity to love live on through every animal we save. After class, Jennifer walked one last time through the halls of the university that had become her second home. She stopped at Duke's memorial garden, where now stood a small but dignified statue of the golden dog, surrounded by flowers and thank you plaques from families they had helped. Duke, our journey together may be ending, but your legacy will live on forever, Jennifer said, touching the statue. You proved that an abandoned animal can become a hero who saves thousands of others. When Jennifer got home that night, she found Michael in the garden, tending to the flowers they had planted over Duke's grave years before. The spot had become a small personal memorial where the family often came to reflect and remember. How was your last class? Michael asked. Perfect, Jennifer replied. I told Duke's story one more time and I saw the same determination in the students' eyes that we had when we decided to save him. Duke would be proud of all the good his story has brought to the world, Michael said, hugging Jennifer. Sometimes I think he always knew there was something special about his mission here, Jennifer answered, as if he came to us not just to be saved, but to teach us how to save others. That evening, Jennifer sat on her favorite porch and opened a photo album documenting her entire journey with Duke and the work that had grown from his story. There were pictures of Duke from his first traumatized days to his happiest moments, photos of other animals saved using his techniques, and images of ceremonies and honors she had received over the years. On the last page of the album was a picture of Duke sleeping peacefully in the sun during his final days, surrounded by plants, with an expression of absolute serenity. It was the perfect image of how his story had ended, not in sadness, but in the peace of a life lived with love and purpose. Thank you for everything, my friend, Jennifer whispered, closing the album. You transformed our family, our community, and thousands of lives around the world. No animal could leave a more beautiful legacy. End of story. Now, tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your heartfelt words in the comments. Do you think Jennifer made all the right decisions with Duke? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.